My dear madam, said he, sit down. The matter stands thus. In the first place, your writer of intensities must have very black ink and a very big pen with a very blunt nib. And, mark me, Miss Psyche Zenobia, he continued after a pause with the most impressive energy and solemnity of manner, mark me, that pen must never be mended. Greetings, Poe fans, and welcome back to one of our degree episodes. I am Carmen Bolden,
And I am Jeanie Smith.
and we are
We are
the
the
Poe
Postastic
2.
2. We're getting close.
Yay!
It was better than anything else.
Yes,
A little lag.
yes, that's okay though. So,
Yep.
Jeanie, what are we
Mhm.
going to talk about tonight?
Well, if no one can tell who's watching that sees the background and the pictures, this is our pop culture episode, and it's going to be talking about Poe's person popping into certain shows, shall we say.
Yes, yes. His persona and
Yeah.
what the animated world has chosen to make him look like and act like, which we found to be very, very interesting.
Yes, and it fits very well because, the thing about it is, in most animations, they're very cartoonish because
Yes.
most of them are comical
Mm-hmm.
and those kinds of things. So it fits very well with that.
Yeah.
However, I was surprised to see that one of the things that Carmen and I had discussed is that there's quite a few things that are based on Poe's works and adaptations, but very few things that actually has Poe as an actual character
Yes.
in the shows, which is what we wanted to expand upon for this episode. So
Exactly.
we found four, I guess, well, three and a quarter, I would say. Three and a quarter that were very much Poesque.
Yes.
And so one you want to start with we're going to start with the modern to the old. Do we ever decide that?
I think we decided to go chronological old to new.
Okay, I just wanted
Good
to make
either
sure.
way. I'm good either way.
Yeah, I like it from the very first to what's current.
Yeah, at least what
So
we could find, definitely.
yeah,
And just adding on to what Jeannie just said, at first I just kind of went through and tried to find any kind of animated Poe that I could find, whether it be a Poe pop-in or a Poe adaptation. And so we decided, because of how many we found, that this would make for two separate episodes on Poe pop culture in the animated world. So we're kind of excited about that.
yeah, and one of the things that I thought was most interesting is that in one way they do tie in because they're all basic animations
Yeah.
using Poe, but the most interesting thing is that story-wise, the ones that talk about Poe as a person versus his Poe adaptations don't really kind of go together,
I agree.
in my opinion.
I think they are
So,
two very separate entities.
right. So, Carmen, if you want to start with the oldest one, considering it's, pointing at your head.
Yes, yes. That Poe is pointing perfectly at my, I don't know, what's another word for brain with a P?
Cranium,
Yeah,
or
there we
your,
go.
yeah, your, at your cranium, at your, your psyche. There you go.
Yeah, at my psyche.
Yeah, at your psyche, pointing at your psyche.
That's perfection.
Yeah, it's perfection.
Perfection. Oh my gosh. Okay, we got to stop this.
Oh yeah, we gotta
Okay.
stop it.
So the earliest kind of Poe figure in an animated series that we found, and this one has a reboot as well, but the first iteration is Mr. Peabody and Sherman, which was little shorts on the Bullwinkle cartoon show back in the 60s. I believe it started in 1959 and went to 1962. And
Mm-hmm.
so this particular episode of Mr. Peabody and Sherman took place on, let's see, I don't have an actual date or like day date or month date, but it was in 1962. It was in season two, episode 21. It was, I believe, the last episode of that series for Sherman and Peabody and or Mr. Peabody and on the Bullwinkle show. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
And
Poe did it. He buried him.
yeah, you can kind of say that. Let me find my notes and I will talk more about it. And the funny thing is I remember watching these particular cartoons on Sundays. They came on one of our local, just regular TV stations before cable, and I loved all of the Bullwinkle, the shorts that they had, especially Mr. Peabody and Sherman, because they were time travelers and they used the Wayback Machine to go back in time to meet all of these different people, and they tried to correct the wrongs of things that happened to these people on their journey. So they had missions. It wasn't just let's go time travel, see what's happening. They had to right the wrongs. And so with Poe's situation, they definitely had a wrong to right. So it was, and that
Yeah.
part was really, really cute. And so at the beginning, before they go back in time, they mention murders in the Rue Morgue. Uh, I think it was Mr. Peabody, the dog, was holding a copy of the book, and he's like, "We've got to go back and see Poe," and because Poe is having trouble with his writing, he's kind of got writer's block, if you will, in a certain way, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So they go back to 1832, and there's one issue I have with that. Jeannie, how old would Poe have been in 1832?
Well, in 1832, he would have been, let's see,
I'm putting you on the math
20,
spot.
yeah, 23.
Exactly. So he was just beginning. I mean, he had written things when he was a teenager, up through when he was at University of Virginia, as well as when he was in West Point and things like that. But when they showed the murders in the Rue Morgue, it kind of led me to believe, well, they're going to go back to 1841 when that was published. So when they went back 9 years before that, it kind of confused me. So that to me, that was one little glitch that they could have done a little bit better. But
Well, you have to think about it because that's one of the things that I was going to bring up later when I talked
mhm,
about the next one
okay,
is that for the most part, they were definitely using literary license here.
they
But
were
at the same time, I don't think they were doing it historically accurate because not a lot of people would understand that or get that who weren't
true.
diehard, especially kids. Think of it. Most of the people, well, yeah, most of the people that were watching Rocky and Bullwinkle and all these shorts
Yeah,
were not old enough to delve that deep.
true. That is true. Well, okay. So going back to the episode, so Poe's writer's block is I'm taking a little bit of license, kind of saying it like that, was that everything he was writing had a happy ending. And
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Peabody, especially even more than Sherman, he was like, okay, we can't have this. He is the master of the macabre. He has to write horror. And so, which we know Poe wrote more than just horror, but that is one of the biggest things he's known for. So they get back there, and Poe's, saying all these sweet things, and they're like, what? And so they take him to a haunted house and they go through a trap door. They find there's a room of torture. It kind of made me think of Pit and the Pendulum. And Poe isn't really scared. that's kind of the ironic thing. And so they end up going through kind of another area, like a trapdoor kind of thing. And they end up having to swim all this way. They go through this little like porthole. It's kind of like a tube or something, but it's still in the water. Then they end up on the beach and they start talking and say, okay, we've got to go to Poe's house. So they take him to his house. He still hasn't gotten over it. And then, and this spoiler alert, I'm about to give a spoiler. I'm just going to go ahead. And the mail truck comes by, delivers Poe a letter. And he like is just horror stricken when he opens up this letter and reads what it says. And they're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And before Poe can say anything, Mr. Peabody says, it's April 15th. It's tax day. And so that's what scared Poe back into writing horror.
Well, that's kind of ironic because,
Huh?
well, income tax hadn't been around yet.
Right, exactly. Like
So,
to say
because that
Jeff,
wasn't until the 16th Amendment, and they
right.
hadn't even got to pass the 11th by this time. So,
Yeah, Jeff
um,
Jeff and I watched this together, and as soon as they said April 15th, before he could get out, it's tax day, Jeff was like, wait a minute, that's not accurately accurate. That's not
yeah,
exactly correct.
exactly. It's like, well, we're really, really taking some little, but once again, like I said, and here's the thing, how many kids would get that reference either?
True. I think I do remember getting it, but I'm weird.
Well, well, most of us would have got it because most of our parents would be, complaining about tax
Right.
day. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
if we paid attention, we would hear it going, oh,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah, it was kind of ironic that tax day would scare him, and I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, that would scare me back to the macabre.
But the one thing I will say is that when they showed his house, it was very plain. It was very modest, more like his house in Baltimore. And so
Right.
I thought that they did that nicely. I mean, it obviously didn't look anything like it, but the reminiscence of it was there, the nostalgia, I guess. And
Hmm.
the way, like right behind me is Poe. And oh,
Hmm.
there's Mr. Peabody. Well, kind of. Okay. It kind of raised my shoulder or something when I did that.
Yeah, your
Um,
shoulder let Peabody
yeah.
show.
But anyway, so Poe, I was gonna say pointing at Poe, the way he's dressed and everything, they really did capture his image as an older man. This is what, to me, it looks like Poe at the end of his life, in the last couple years with the mustache. And so I guess the one thing too is the actor persona, or animated persona, whatever you will call it. If he was 23, he would not have looked like this. He would not have had a mustache. And again,
No,
but kids that might have known Poe, if they showed him looking younger, would have had no clue who he was. So they kind of had to use what the pop culture reference is, and that is Poe with the mustache.
exactly. And I want to actually point out another issue too,
Yeah.
is that you can tell the time period of this because this is very Schoolhouse Rocks.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Good
They
point.
only have four fingers, which I never could understand how they had four fingers on a hand. I'm like, okay. But it's like every, animation, they had four fingers on each hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as it goes as just a short and them going back to trying to just shock him back into the macabre
Mm-hmm.
and get him out of his writer's block, as you said,
Right.
it was literary, or what's the word I'm looking for? Uh,
Not literary.
audience, audience, dramatic,
I'm not sure what you're looking.
written. it was well written because it was basically being creative and attractive to the audience. That's what I'm trying to say, but I
Okay.
can't think of the word.
Appealing, appealing.
There we go.
Okay, okay.
'Cause, I
Wasn't
mean,
sure
there's a
which way you were going. That's why I had to wait for you to have your stream of
my
consciousness.
yeah, for my brain to do the Rolodex and try to figure out where I'm going with that. Um,
Exactly, exactly.
entertaining, entertaining. Why the heck couldn't I come up with that word?
I don't
It was
know.
I don't know. It was very entertaining, and it
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 was it's
got the notice. Yeah.
yeah, it's cute. I remember watching this when I was a kid, and it's fun. It's just good fun, even though there are some inaccuracies. It's still
Hmm.
so, and Poe was represented very nicely with the way he looks. So,
Yeah, and it was very good that they actually introduced some type of literary figure.
oh,
That was one good
absolutely.
thing that I loved is they introduced historical figures
Hmm.
into the stories, even though they had some inaccuracies and stuff, but
Yeah,
still they were trying to, you know, introduce them.
yeah. Now, before we move on to the next one, so Mr. Sherman, Mr. Sherman, Mr. Peabody and Sherman was resurrected and given a reboot in 2000. What did I tell you, Jeannie? 2017.
Yeah.
And they came out with modern episodes. They still pretty much look the same. They still have the time machine. They introduced a few other characters on on the show, and they have like a almost like a time machine like talk show, if you will. And so they
Hmm.
have a live audience, especially for the episode that I watched with Poe in the modern reboot. Do you want me to talk about this before you do the next?
No, let's talk about that since it
Okay.
ties in. So,
It does. It very much does. And so again, this one was in 2017, was the reboot, and this was in season 4 in episode 12, and the particular episode was called "Seen It, Edgar Allan Poe." And so in this particular one, they actually go back to 1845, which is kind of funny because if you look at Jeannie's screen, it's got the same
yeah.
date. And they go to Baltimore, and I wrote down a note. I believe I said January, and there is a raven there as well. They find Poe happy again at his house, and he has I'm reading my notes because I wrote something down and I cannot read it, and that is a problem.
Yeah,
So
when you can't read your own writing, that is a problem.
it happens all the time, especially as I'm getting older. But anyway, they insist on seeing his writing room. It's chained up where he doesn't let anybody in, but Mr. Peabody and Sherman talk him into it. So they go in, and Poe has been working on a particular book, and he turns around, he gets it, he opens it up, and guess what kind of book it is?
Children's book?
It's a children's book, and it's a pop-up book.
Okay.
So again, it's almost like they're doing the same story with a little different twist on it. So then Poe gets even more happy. He paints his house pink, like literally bright Pepto-Bismol pink. And they try to remind him that he is very creepy and he needs to stay creepy. And they find out the reason why he's so happy is he is in love. He's over the top, head over heels in love with someone named Lenore.
Mm,
Okay. And again, keep in mind that if this was really Poe, he'd still be married to Virginia because she didn't pass until 1847. So
right.
again, this is a kid show. And so they go to meet her, and Poe goes and sits on a bench in front of this building. And the building says aviary, which is a place to house birds. So
Mm-hmm.
Lenore comes out, and Lenore is the raven.
Oh.
He's in
So
love.
he has a fetish. He has a love for a bird.
He's pulling a Tesla, and
There we go.
Tesla with the pigeons, but now Poe
Mm-hmm.
ravens. So, but basically, so they're going to get married. Mr. Peabody performs the ceremony. And the next thing you know, the ceremony is being held, and all these things start coming out of the walls. And I can't remember the exact how it was set up, but they find out it's a hunting lodge. So
Mm.
all the birds have a conniption fit. And
Yeah.
so Lenore is just, like horribly upset, and she leaves him. And so this leaves Poe in just the worst condition possible. And so he is now able to go back to writing horror. So very similar storylines with just a few different twists. So
Well, it's more than just a few similarities. I'm just going to say it now because,
the same story, really.
yeah, literally because it's like there are, what's the word for it? There's way too much coincidence
Yes.
to
Yes.
different things. So
Yeah. So it
I just,
feel almost like a trope in a way.
yes, it does. And
Mhm.
that to me is a disservice, but okay.
Yeah, because they really could have done something completely different, but they didn't. And
Well, it sounds like they didn't, but they didn't even make it better. They didn't make it any different. They just kind of like, meh, whatever.
no, because if I had to pick between the two, I like the original better, not just because of the nostalgia from my childhood, but because yeah, I think it was a little bit better storyline and made more sense because Poe falling in love with the Raven was very out there, I guess you could say.
Well, in some instances, yes,
Yeah,
but it just didn't make it. It didn't connect to me that why would him falling in love with Lenore the Raven cause him to go oh so happy go lucky and be writing children's books.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
There's no correlation in my opinion on that one.
No, I agree. I totally agree.
Which is well, which brings us to the one I want to talk about, which
Yes.
is
Yes.
Time Squad.
Yes. And
Time
I
Squad.
and Jeannie's
Go
going to
ahead.
talk about this one, but I did watch it as well. So we had a hoot talking about it.
Yeah, the episode's called Every Poe Has a Silver Lining. Yes, and this was season one, episode 9A. I don't know why the A is on there,
I
but
wondered that too. That's so
I'm
weird.
like,
Anyway,
is there a B, C, D of episode 9? I don't know, but I'm just saying.
exactly.
Uh, but the one interesting thing, and like Carmen and I were discussing, is if you see the picture, this is like what the beginning, because in Time Squad, if you've never seen it, there is a robot. He is Lawrence Larry, is what they call him, 3000. He's the robot. Then there's Otto Osworth, who's the kid. And then let's see, what's the Beauregard Buck is what they call him. Uh, Chud Russell. I don't know, Tud Russell. He is a Time Squad officer.
Okay.
So the three of them, they go back and they change things back to the way they were when there's hiccups in time.
Okay.
Well, they get this alert that Poe suddenly has gone from being the father of horror and the macabre
Hmm.
to suddenly, once more, being, oh, this bubbly personality. And so they immediately have to go back in time. So on the picture, you see the board that's showing that this is their next assignment.
Hmm.
Edgar Allan Poe, 1845, Maryland. Well, as Carmen and I discovered, the Allen is misspelled.
Yes, it should be an A.
It,
It's not instead of
yes,
D.
yes. So we were like, yeah, okay. So anyway, the one thing they show up, they go back to the Baltimore house,
Hmm.
and I've never seen the Baltimore house in person, but from the pictures I've seen, they've got, it's basically the A-frame house. It looks
Yeah.
pretty much renditions
Yeah.
of what it
It's
would be.
red brick. Yeah. Hmm.
So, but he is dressed in this god awful pink suit. I mean, he looks like something like, when the blue suits of the 70s were popular, this would be like the pink suits
Like a
were
leisure suit.
very popular.
A
Yeah.
leisure suit. Polyester.
And what's so funny is they show up and he thinks they're trick or treating and he goes, I don't celebrate that holiday.
Yeah.
So that's first thing of where it's like, wait a minute, Poe and no Halloween? No. Now, whether the man actually celebrated Halloween in real life, who knows?
Right. Right.
But because of the connotation between Halloween and the scary, I
Hmm.
think that's where they were going with it.
I think so too.
But they have where Poe is writing children's books. Yet again, this is another tie-in to the other ones.
Absolutely.
And he writes greeting cards. Okay, the greeting card industry has not come about yet, people. That did not happen until the early 1900s when, so now it was, but it's very interesting. They're very creative and they get almost perfectly the Poe writing to this every time he whips out a greeting card to fit whatever they're doing. So
Yes.
they decide they need to get him kicked back into the macabre. So
Hmm.
they start taking him to different places, like a burned out uh, place with all these animals that are covered in soot. And Poe decides, oh, we'll just make them happy. And he puts birthday hats on their head and hands them greeting cards, and they're all like, what? And and then everywhere they take him to go to try, and that's supposed to be some type of tragedy, he starts this some type of celebration with all these greeting cards and streamers and all this, and turns it into a party, and he even dresses as a clown
I don't-
with hearts on his suit.
I about lost it there. And when he does that, he reads that book called The Pink Kitten. I
Oh,
about
yes.
I about fell out of my chair.
Yes, and that's the interesting thing, because instead of the Raven, he writes a story called The Bear.
Yes,
So instead of the Raven, it's the bear. Instead of the black cat, it's the pink kitten, which I was like, oh my Lord.
I know.
Uh, but what's so interesting is they're like exhausted, and they're like, we've been here days and there's nothing we do. Nowhere we take him is going to turn him into the man that we need him to be.
I
It's like we
know.
need
I
that
know.
macabre back. And so he bakes them this pink, icinged cake and hands it to them. And Otto, the young kid, he's eating it. He's like, oh, this is good. But the robot, you know, Larry, he's very critical, because the episode starts when he's trying to make his perfect rose petal souffle.
That's right.
So he is like a a chef extraordinaire when it comes
Yes.
to baking. And so he immediately starts critiquing everything about this cake to Poe. And everything he says, you can see Poe's eyes start changing. They get angry, and he every time they say something bad about his cake, he just starts changing. And then he totally loses it, And next thing you know, he's dressed all in black and he's saying the most melancholy tone of voice, and he's scaring children that are actually out trick or treating now.
Yeah.
And so it took criticizing a pink cake for him to go back to being the father of horror and everything. And I thought that was very interesting because to me, it was like the perfect segue because of how Griswold would criticize him.
Yes, Jeannie, that's a really good point, and something that I said to Jeff while watching that episode. They made Poe the antithesis of himself, like
Yeah.
of the stereotype of himself. And the one thing with the three episodes, the two Mr. Peabody and Sherman and this Time Squad one, is that it to me it felt like okay, Poe was like he had a sense of humor. He wasn't this dark, dreary man. And they went to the extreme of both ends, which exactly right. They Griswolded him at the end of that episode.
Hmm. Well, and it also what hit me the most about it too is with all these episodes that he actually starts out being, like they have to go change him back from being this happy person
Yeah,
because the happy writing is not cutting it
right.
and all this kind of stuff. But I think one of the things that hit me the most about this is because it was very much showing that criticisms or how you view yourself or how you have others view you can affect personality.
Yeah,
Because think about it, Poe could have been this happy-go-lucky, and I hope not, pink suit wearing dude
to that extreme.
to that extreme. But life kind of veered him in that way because he had tragedies that kept happening and happening and happening, and that each one of those it can affect a person's psyche, their
Absolutely.
personality, the way they view the world, and it's their choices that they make of how to deal with that make that person into who they are.
Absolutely. And Poe definitely turned to writing to
Mhm.
put those feelings out there in how he was, his emotions of what was going on in his life.
Yeah, and I think that's what led to, and unfortunately, it was posthumously that led to his eventual uh, notoriety.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about him now, and it's 216 years after his birth.
Yeah.
And so I think that in itself tells part of the story
Yeah.
because most people we identify with certain things about certain people, and that's what makes us attach ourselves to them.
Yeah.
So I
I
think even
right.
today, people are still living through Poe's tragedies
Hmm.
with his writing.
Yeah.
And I think what's even perfectly uh, is that the next thing we're about to talk about, which is the last one we're going to talk about since we already skipped to the 2017 Sherman and Peabody.
Yeah.
This is the last this is the last one that we really wanted to touch upon, but kind of rounds it all out to a different aspect because it does not have the same connotations as the other three, but it
No,
does.
no. And before we get to that one, I just want to throw in one more, the little one that, doesn't do what it should have done with Poe. The
Oh
2012
yeah,
Gravity
that's the one I
Falls.
forgot about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, because it comes 1 year before the one the finale. Gravity Falls did an episode in 2012, and this was season one, actually episode three, and it was called Headhunters. And
Mhm.
basically, the two little twins, I think it's Mabel and oh, I forget his little name.
But I don't remember. It
Tipper.
starts with a B,
Mabel
I
and
think.
Tipper are with
Oh, Tim.
their grunkle Stan, and they find out that he has all these wax figures kind of in this, hidden room. So they end up getting them out, and she makes a wax figure of her uncle. Then all of a sudden, there's a mystery involved because his head goes missing. And so they're trying to blame one of the townspeople. Well, come to find out, it's the mannequin or the wax figures because they're upset that they were being shown. They come to life every time the moon, it's not full, it's when the moon is waxing.
Hmm.
Poetic, I should say. They come to life and they were upset that they got shoved in the corner basically and lost their livelihood. And so the unfortunate thing, I was excited about this episode. It's a really cute little show, and the Poe wax figure is in there. He's in the background. He's part of when the wax figures try to take over everything, but he never says anything. They don't call him Poe, but it is very evident it is Edgar Allan Poe. And so it was a cute little episode, but it was very disappointing that Poe had less of a role than Sherlock Holmes.
Well, I mean, I don't even think Poe had a role at all.
He didn't.
But
He was
yeah,
fighting with the mannequins, and that's about it.
yeah. So I mean, he doesn't have any speaking part. He doesn't have any, place for the story itself.
Right.
So I
Right.
guess that's why I kind of forgot about it. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I debated whether to bring it up, but I think it's noteworthy because they did attempt to at least acknowledge him.
True. Yeah. And, if they put Sherlock Holmes in there, why not put, the father detective in there?
Absolutely.
Not that probably anybody knows that.
Yeah. Some people do.
Not kids, I guarantee it, that
And
would be watching Gravity Falls, but okay.
that's true. That is true. But, you know, so
It is what it is.
it is.
The adults watching it, we would know. You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So let's get to the finale, which you're right, Jeannie. It's the most unusual, different.
But it
Oh,
fits with what the show it showed up on was.
it did.
uh South Park. Now, I will have to say South Park was never the only reason I know South Park is through the memes.
Okay.
That's the only way I've ever known anything about Kenny.
Okay.
Is all I ever heard when I was teaching in the early days was Kenny's dead.
Yeah. Who
Kenny's
killed him?
dead.
Yeah.
Who killed Kenny? And I'm like, who is Kenny? You
Yeah.
know,
Well,
so
I will say I have watched several episodes of it. Sometimes they're so disturbing that I don't want to finish the episode. But it's not a favorite show of mine at all.
mm,
Sometimes they do get the humor perfectly right, and it's not always what's the best word I can say?
appropriate.
Appropriate, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of the commentary that I saw from like the YouTube
Mm-hmm.
things is what was interesting is about these episodes have to do with the goth kids
Yes.
and the South Park and the goth kids. And this particular episode was season 17. Ugh,
Yes. Episode
I
four.
was like, 17, episode 4. I'm like, good Lord, 17? But I was like, I'm old.
Yeah. Did you see what the episode was called?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to.
Okay.
Um,
I've got it if you want me to say.
yeah, go ahead.
Dawn of the Posers.
Yes.
But it's posers as in POSERS, like imposter. But there's a really funny, ironic, kind of coincidental twist when you think of poser, POSER, versus poser, POESER, within the
Hmm.
show.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things is that this episode is kind of referencing season 7 episode called Raisins
Okay.
when he appeared on Stan Marsh's shirt as he had temporarily turned goth. So Stan Marsh, the character, temporarily
Yeah.
turned goth and was
Okay.
wearing a shirt because they don't call Edgar Allan Poe. They refer to him as Night Pain,
Yes.
which I thought, okie dokie, that's
Well,
actually kind of cool.
yeah, and when Poe does appear, he wants to be referred to on this episode as Night Pain.
Exactly. So and the one thing about the episode is that they want to fight the emo scourge, the goths and the vampires. So the
Yes.
emos, these are the emos. They're wanting to, the goths and the vampires summon Poe as a ghost.
Yes, because
So and
well, and I was going to say to set up too that these goth kids are being sent to this camp by their
mhm.
parents to fix them, and they come back as emo, is how they've set this episode up.
Right. And then the goth kids hate because one of the things I thought was interesting is they talk about how their mother abuses her and everything, and she abuses her by referring to her as being emo
Yes,
instead of being goth, which
yes,
I totally understand that. So, but what's so funny is that upon them summoning Poe, he goes by insulting emos as wannabe conformists
yes,
and then vampires as douchey.
yes.
And I'm like, well, that works. And that's how he got his goth name is Night Pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. So Troubled Acres is the name of the camp that they
Yes,
send these kids to try to get them out of their what's a good word for it?
their state of
Yeah, their
mind.
state. But Poe ends up abandoning the group instead of and chooses to drink coffee.
Yes, and smoke
Yeah,
at a
yeah,
diner.
and smoke. And he just wants to, he's like, I'm done. And they go back to find him and say, dude, you can't. We summoned you for a reason.
Oh yeah.
So, but he eventually returns to reveal that the emo plants that are actually just regular ficus plants from Lowe's Home and Garden.
Yes. That part was really funny. And when
Yeah,
talking about when they were all in the car heading to the what did you call it?
Troubled Acres.
Troubled Acres. And they're all kind of arguing and such, and Poe is calling them all the names, but he
Yeah.
keeps calling them posers. And that's why I said it's kind of funny because one of the goths is an imposter working for the emos, which is,
Uh,
it poser. But at the same time, when you think about goths coming from the gothic king of horror,
uh-huh.
and when you think of poser, he was saying POSER, but it's just kind of putting that Poe spin on it and with poser because they're trying to act like the gothic horror person, but like kind of stemming from Poe, but just you know, pun on the name.
Yeah.
I know
Pete was the
went on
poser,
a lot
by the
about
way.
that. Yeah. So
Yeah,
just
Pete was
that
the
was really,
poser.
yeah, that was really funny.
So yeah, and I mean declaring his goth name as Night Pain, I think was just perfect.
Yes.
Uh, so, but it's kind of he leaves them because he chooses to drink coffee,
Yes.
which I don't blame him. Yeah,
Yeah. And then
choosing coffee.
yeah, and then the kids end up figuring out that yeah, the plants are from Lowe's and that it's just a hoax, and Poe
Uh-huh.
goes back to the greenhouse where all that is, and then the climax of the whole show at the end.
Yes,
You want to reveal it?
you go ahead.
So then all of a sudden, behind all these plants starts popping out all these people and cameras, and they were all put on a like a reality TV show called
Uh-huh.
Yes, I Was Scared.
Oh, it was like a very bad
Right.
version of Candid Camera.
Yes,
Or
yeah.
are you being punked? Or what was
Yeah,
it called from
punked. Yeah,
MTV? Yeah, you're
punked.
being
Yeah.
punked. I was like, oh,
It's
that
just
was just
like,
bad.
oh, it was. But it was funny bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I do like the goth kids. I will give them props. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't like how uh the one thing I guess I didn't like about South Park was the easy drop of the language by the kids.
Yeah. It
Uh,
is heavy. It is definitely.
yeah,
Hmm.
because it reminded me too much of like Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
Although Beavis and Butthead did not have that much cussing, but they were very much into the smoking and the
Yeah.
other things. So,
Yeah. I think South Park is quite higher in the regard of more mature audience. Oh,
absolutely.
over, or even over than Beavis and Butthead, and even though they never met Poe.
Yeah. So it was an interesting episode because one, it was South Park and I never watched an episode of South Park.
Yeah.
But two, it was like I did like Poe's character, and what I thought really interesting is yes, they had him walking around with a cigarette in his hand the whole time.
Yeah. Like
It's like he had his
Rod Serling or something.
yes, and him drinking coffee, and I'm thinking but he's a ghost.
Yeah. Exactly.
He wasn't a corporeal being because they actually made it in the episode because you could see through him.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay,
And
uh,
his voice was just weird too.
yeah, it
It's
was.
almost like Valley guy like.
Well, it kind of fit with the whole way they they had him
It was,
representing.
yeah,
So
because he was like, "You're all posers," and a lot of the characters kind of have that voice, but that's kind of how he talked. I'm Night Pain, and that
yeah,
bothered me. His voice bothered me. A lot of things
yeah.
in this episode bothered me, but
Well, yeah, and the voice, I think they were trying to make it play off like a snooty Southern thing, and I'm like, that's not snooty nor well, that's snooty sounding, but it's
but
not Southern any way in
no,
shape or form.
not at all.
So it was,
Very interesting. And so I guess what I want to say about what we found with animated series that have Poe characters were unfortunately disappointing overall.
yes, very much so. A- And it's not, I, I don't know how I want to say this.
Okay.
It was like a regurgitation.
Yeah.
It wasn't really, yeah,
Very,
I'm glad they introduced the historical aspect of it and refer to how his writing is what made him who he is. And
Absolutely.
they wanted to protect that by making sure he remembered who he was, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it just felt contrived.
Yeah, and really, South Park was the only real original idea, very different from
Mhm.
the other three. And the other kind of similarity of the other three all involved time travel, which I thought
Yeah.
was interesting because, you know, there could have been other types of shows that, like, say, okay, for instance, thinking about like the Flintstones,
Hmm.
even though like during the time frame that the Flintstones were filmed or created, I should say, and drawn, illustrated, I should say, they had like Anne Margrock for Anne Margaret. I mean, and she was alive, working as an actress and entertainer. But, other shows have brought on historical characters like that without having to do the time travel, like, have some kind of original spin on it.
Yeah, it's kind of like they didn't know how else to do it,
Hmm.
and that's the only way that they could come up with that would
Yeah.
fit with the story, I guess, that
Yeah.
they thought of. Now, even with the South Park episode, they brought him back as a ghost.
Yeah.
So that's the closest to him being an intro, like on like the Flintstone type of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Even if he was a ghost and not a real being. So
Right. One other specific, like when I was doing my research on this, I just, kind of looked up animated Poe, things like that. I'd get a little bit more specific than that. But the one show that I looked specifically for to see if there was a Poe character in an animated series, and he never appeared, was Scooby Doo. And to me, that was a lost opportunity because it was all about mystery.
but that's the thing. He never showed up in the animated series, but he showed up in the comics.
True. No, I agree with you on that. But I was just talking about just like the live animation, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, they made mention of certain aspects, but they never showed him in the actual series of Scooby
Right.
Doo.
Yeah.
But yeah, they definitely used him in the comics themselves because,
Oh,
most people don't realize that Scooby Doo is a major comic book collection.
true. Very true. Yeah, just I was just talking about the animated series on TV, is that he never appeared in one of those episodes.
And you know why I think that is because from the from all the store, from all the ones that I watched, because I was a Scooby Doo fan
Mhm, me
from the
too.
get go,
Hmm.
um, is I don't think he would fit with any of their storylines.
He might not unless somebody pretended, with the mask to be,
Yeah, to
yeah,
pretend to be the ghost of Edgar Allan Poe, but
right.
still, because most of the ghosts they dealt with were the bad guys,
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's why he didn't fit.
Yeah.
And, you know, I I mean, I would love to, and I would be happy if somebody wanted to do it now to
Oh, God,
reanimate and do a new one with Scooby Doo.
that would be amazing.
Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, they made the live action shows. Why not?
Yeah, I agree. Team them up. Team them up.
Yeah, that would be the only way that I think they could bring in Edgar Allan Poe is make it a team up.
Yeah. For him
But
definitely to
because
solve the mystery. Yeah.
yes, so
That'd be fun.
it hey, it's an idea. Somebody needs to go with it.
Yep. I agree.
So, but yeah, yeah, I was shocked myself that some of the more popular mystery animation cartoons didn't have any Poe
Hmm.
to them. But if, like we're talking about, most of the storylines that these created were time travels to save Poe from himself, basically.
Exactly. Yes. But
So maybe
but
that's why they didn't.
yeah, but I really enjoyed this spin on our pop culture Poe, you know, doing this, and it was very interesting to delve into this animated world.
Yeah, I did. I liked it too. I mean, I found I'd never watched Time Squad because the early 20s was not my cartoon phase.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Oh, I know.
and like I said, I never was a South Park fan, so I never watched them. I never, you know, audience members, if you're listening, please don't hold it against me, but I have never watched a Simpson episode
Yeah. Well,
ever.
that's going to be something that we talk about in another season.
Yes, and I just wanted to lay it out now
Yes.
so that way when we get there,
You have
I'm
about a
not
year
gonna
of forgiveness, Jeannie.
exactly. They can ask for my I can ask for my forgiveness starting now.
Yes.
Uh so I think we pretty much gave a good rendition of the pop culture of Poe
Yeah.
in
Pose pop in. Absolutely.
yeah, Poe's pop in Poe. Pop in Poe. That
So,
sounds like a bad pill. Okay.
oh,
Sorry.
yes. Oh my goodness. Well,
Like
and
a gothic pill,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Uh, So we all, always want to, thank our listeners and our viewers. Everything we do, we think about what and hope that you like what we're choosing to talk about on our episodes. And so we invite you to definitely, like us on Facebook, on X, on follow us on Instagram. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we try to put out all of our episodes on YouTube, as well as we do some shorts from time to time. And we're trying to do more of those. And sometimes time gets away from us.
Mhm.
Not time travel, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
just, we also have a Patreon and we have extra content. We have puzzles on there. And so, just again, thank you for everything you do to support us. And we appreciate you just more than we can say.
And we hope you just continue listening and following because
Yes,
we hope to bring you more Poe down the road.
absolutely. And yeah, don't forget Spotify. And we're on Audible, Amazon. I can't think of there's some smaller podcast
Yeah,
channels out there.
platforms,
Yeah,
but
platforms. Thank you. Yes.
I
So
can't think of them either. But
yeah,
most major platforms and some small platforms, but you could, I'm sure if you just type in our 6 Degrees of Edgar Allan Poe podcast, it'll show you where to find us.
absolutely. And stay tuned because our third annual poetry contest will be happening again in April. So be on the lookout for more information about that coming soon. And we have another very exciting opportunity in May that we can't talk about yet, but
No.
we'll leave you with a little mystery.
Yes. And so just keep that in mind. So, and on that note, we
We are
are
oh,
Poe out.
out.
I presume everybody has heard of me. My name is the Senora Psyche Zenobia. This I know to be a fact. Nobody but my enemies ever calls me Suki Snobs.